Okay. Let's go to the 1-2-3 inning. First out, obviously the big story in baseball right now, Shohei Ohtani, the controversy, as you would say, I guess, as far as Dalton Brown is concerned, maybe something other than that could be, other than that phrase could be used to describe this situation. But Shohei Ohtani and the controversy surrounding him and his former interpreter, Ippei Mizuhara, I think that's a big, big story, obviously, right now. The story, if you are not fully familiar as of right now, just a quick background on it. Ippei Mizuhara is right now being accused of stealing money to pay off gambling debt from Shohei Ohtani's account. Those wire transfers were apparently made with Shohei Ohtani's name on them. Now, just to be clear, Shohei Ohtani has not himself been accused of any wrongdoing, of any gambling, other than by people on Twitter, the court of public opinion, all of that stuff. So listen, Dalton, this is your team here. And if you want to provide a little bit more background on this situation, please feel free to do so. So I'm going to let you kind of lead off with this because you have some pretty strong opinions on this. How much of a story do you really think that we have here with Shohei and Ippei Mizuhara?
My strongest opinion on this is that there aren't that many strong opinions to be had about it, right? Mm-hmm. Here's the reality of the situation. We're looking at every party involved in this, from Ohtani to his interpreter, Ippei Mizuhara, right, to the lawyers involved, to the bookie and his lawyer. Everybody involved in this, at this point, is telling the same story, right? Now, maybe they weren't for the first 12 hours, because maybe Ippei was like, hey, you know what? Maybe I can just make it look like Shohei was covering for me. That way my friend doesn't think I was stealing from him. And who knows? One thing that I think is interesting about all of this is, like, based on accusations that have actually been made, the worst case scenario here, again, based on accusations that have actually been made, the worst case scenario here is that Ohtani lent his buddy money to cover his gambling debt, right? Now, that's problematic from that's a poor decision to make when you're somebody of Ohtani's stature perspective.
Yeah.
But it's not, horribly immoral. It's not something where MLB is going to hand down this incredibly long suspension to punish him for it. It's just not that big of a deal, and it kind of just makes him look like a nice guy who was helping out a friend. Like, it might not be smart if that's what happened, obviously, and he'll learn from it if that's what happened. But, like, right now, based on what we know, that's the worst case scenario here, right? So given that, like, I'm just not sure that this is as big of a story as it's being made out to be. And I think what's making it a big story is the willingness of people to speculate and draw conclusions that they don't really have a lot of evidence to support, and kind of just make a story out of it. Look, as a Duke basketball fan, like, I just saw one of our players have the court stormed against him, and I watched him get made into a villain on Twitter, like, within hours after the court stormed him, he was hurt, right? So, like, I'm very, very aware of how this court of public opinion game goes. I'm aware of the fact that, like, people will run with the most fun and the most explosive version of a story, and the version, frankly, that matches their biases, rather than to sit here and actually take the thing at face value. And to be honest, for the sake of shows like ours, for the sake of television, like, the story itself is interesting, but it's not like, it's not as much of a bombshell as it's being made out to be, unless Ohtani was found gambling. And right now there's no evidence of that. So my word to all of our listeners is just take a deep breath. I mean, for fuck's sake, like, you don't know anything. I don't know anything. All we know is what we've been told. And what we've been told is just not a whole hell of a lot. So, like, just relax, right? Like, the memes are fun. I get it. The jokes are funny. It is what it is. But, like, it's like, relax, everybody. That's kind of all I got on it. Like,
so it is an interesting conversation to have. And, because I think that as far as this whole situation is concerned, it is a little weird. It is something that we haven't really seen before in the public sports space, right? Like this is not something that we hear about very, very often. And I agree with you. I think that most people as of this point are just kind of speculating on what could be the worst case scenario for the biggest star in Major League Baseball, right? Like that's a very big part of this. And I want to make that clear, right? Like there's definitely a bit of this that is just people trying to blow this up into something that maybe isn't there. However, now, like I said, Dalton, you and I have spoken about this briefly before, and I agree with you for the most part. However, I will play a little bit of devil's advocate here because though Ohtani is not accused of doing anything as of yet, that doesn't mean that won't happen, right? So I am
okay, but Mike, just because Carlos Rodon has not been accused of running a child sex trafficking ring doesn't mean it won't happen.
Yeah, you're right. That's true.
Do you understand the world of hypotheticals we're dealing in, right?
Of course. Yeah. Like I said, I'm not disputing anything that you're saying. What I'm saying is that people right now, I think, are having fun with the, well, what if, right? Because listen, I've talked to several people about this, and nobody inside baseball, just buddies of mine, right? I've talked to a bunch of people about this, and they've all kind of come away with the conclusion that's just like, yeah, I mean, it's a little sketchy, but it's probably not that big a deal. But it is kind of interesting to play out the scenario of, well, let's just imagine this, for example, okay? If Shohei Ohtani was betting on sports, right? Whatever. If Shohei Ohtani was betting on baseball, that's a problem, right? Now, like I said, there isn't a basis for that to this point, right? Like you said, all parties right now seem to be in lockstep except for the first 12 hours or so of the entire case opening up since the ESPN article got published.
Right, but even that first 12 hours was still in lockstep about Shohei never gambling. Like that's never been up for debate, right? So to me, and I don't mean to cut you off, but to me, the idea that we can start anything with, hey, if he was betting on baseball, like to me, that is just as absurd as saying, well, if Carlos Rodon was secretly like running around with a 14-year-old off the field. And I'm sorry, Carlos Rodon, there's no reason that I'm targeting you other than that he was the first random Yankee player I could think of, right? But to me, those ideas are the same in the sense that like neither one of them has any basis. So we can sit here and say, hey, it'd be really fun to imagine if we woke up tomorrow and the sky was purple. Like that'd be really fun to imagine. Wouldn't that be a fun topic to talk about? It's like, true. Sure, but like there's no basis in reality for it. So like if that's what we're going to make content out of, then like why don't we make content out of any imaginary scenario?
Okay. But I do have to ask this, right? Because like the way that you're making it sound to me, right, is that there just seemingly seems to be no chance that Ohtani has anything to do with this. There's got to be at least a lick of a chance, Dalton, right? Like this is a very delicate situation. We all listen, everybody, as far as sports gambling is concerned in baseball, right? We all know the track record and what the worst case scenario was. Obviously, it was Pete Rose, and he's banned from the sport, right? And I think that that's unfortunate because I think eventually they're going to let him into the Hall of Fame after he dies. That's a different story. But this is something that where like because the consequences could be so large, of course people are speculating to the worst, right? Like there's got to be at least a little bit of an inkling. Like there's a reason why Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman and Will Smith and Max Muncy and whoever else are not being accused of stuff that's similar to this. Is because this is tied so closely to Ohtani that you have to imagine that even if it is the most minuscule chance, like I said, I'm playing devil's advocate. I agree with you, but there's got to be at least in your mind, even the most minuscule chance that Ohtani is guilty of some wrongdoing. I'm not saying he is, but there's got to be at least a little bit of a snippet of a chance.
Mike, there's a snippet of a chance of that almost anything could be true in this world. Like that's what I'm getting at, right? Like, sure, like I understand that having a gambling related story that close to him is an uncomfortable thing. And I'm sure
Yeah.
it's uncomfortable for him and it's uncomfortable to think about as a baseball fan in general.
Yeah.
But like to go from there to even wondering out loud whether Otani was gambling on sports is just not a fair leap to make. And I'm not saying that I don't understand why it's being made. I'm not even saying that I'm surprised to see it being made everywhere.
Yeah.
Like I said, man, I'm a Duke basketball fan. I'm used to this type of shit. Like this is
Yeah.
child's play. Like honestly. So in that sense, like I'm neither surprised nor like appalled that it's happening. I just think we should be above it. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, listen, you may not be wrong on that. And listen, as far as I'm concerned, I think, honestly, my genuine take on this whole thing is that, and maybe you disagree with me on this, is that Ippei's original story was true. That's my take. I think
possible.
Ippei's original story was true. Now, again, the original story and the story then brought up from Otani's lawyers, you're kind of, just picking at stuff, right? There's no real.
But that's the thing, right? Like because this is because one of the things you and I talked about off air, right? Is we agreed that the worst case scenario here is that Ippei's original story was true.
Yes.
We also agreed that the consequences for the worst case scenario were most likely none.
None. Right.
Okay, so we're in agreement that the actual worst case scenario based in fact here has almost no consequences associated with it. So the only reason that we're really entertaining this to this degree as a story is because there are a lot of loud voices on Twitter and elsewhere who are running with speculation because it's fun to run with speculation, right?
It's the way the world works in 2024, man.
It is the way the world works, but it doesn't mean we have to feed into it, and I'm certainly not going to feed into it. So that's where I'm at.
All right. Let's move on.